What is the definition of art? Well, to simply put it, art is an expression of human imagination. Art is the idea or concept created by an individual within their mind. And most of the time, art is given sensory form in terms of paintings, sculptures, music, and even dance. Cooking can also be considered an art because it is felt through taste, and the flavors the chef had thought of shows their creativity within the dish. So with that in mind, can we consider video games as art? Perhaps you'll disagree. I mean, look at games like Doom, where you just kill a bunch of demons with a shotgun, or Pac-Man, where you just eat orbs or cheese or whatever those glowing spheres are just to accumulate a high score. Where's the expression of human imagination in that? Well, I'm here to convince you that, yes, video games are an art form, and it can be a beautiful one at that. Sometimes you just have to look at the right game. Like, come on, when was the last time someone considered a can of Campbell soup as art? Oh. Anyway, I'll be discussing my favorite game of all time that defines the meaning of art. Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a 2D platforming adventure game created by Team Cherry. That's the gameplay aspect, but that's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at first is the storyline. You are known as the Knight, seeking adventure in the ruined kingdom known as Hallownest. If you were to just watch someone play the game, you'd probably be skeptical and say, that's not art, that's just having fun. But there's a huge story to be found deep within the game. The more you explore the kingdom, you will find little bits and details about what the kingdom of Hallownest has to offer, what it was like before its downfall, and what the inhabitants of the kingdom have felt. Venturing further within the game develops the story and reveals itself as to why the kingdom has collapsed in the first place. All of these mysteries and hidden details are utilized to create a sense of curiosity within the player, and they become more invested in the story the longer they play. The theme of the story is often not obvious, and the player may have to interpret or come up with an idea about what the story is meant to be. A book can do the same thing. You read the introduction, and perhaps it starts off a little vague. You ask yourself questions and ponder about what happens, and the more you read, the more it makes sense. Often, we look for a certain theme or abstract idea the author tries to convey within the story. This is no different with Hollow Knight's story, actually. The writers have crafted something that sparks interest within the player to seek for answers, and perhaps make them think more deeply of the deeper implications the writer wanted to convey. This is similar to what literature tries to do, and therefore the story of Hollow Knight is a work of art. The next part is the music of Hollow Knight, which is beautifully crafted with a specific theme in mind. Each section within Hallownest has its own music that tailors to the mood and setting of the environment. There is a red circus tent just on the outskirts of town, and when we enter it, we hear someone play the accordion that immediately gives us the feeling of excitement with a mix of anxiety added to it. At the end of the tent is one of the most difficult fights of Hollow Knight. It starts off quiet. As we walk down the long corridor, we reach the center of the circus, where there is a red cocoon in the middle of it. The fight starts with the title screen of the circus master, and is then accompanied by perhaps one of the most coolest and intense scores of the game. This fight and the music really fit together because of its intensity and fast pace. This score creates a certain fear and thrill within the player, and they'll definitely know that this fight is not going to be easy. Now let's take it down a notch and look at a different place called the City of Tears, which is the center of the kingdom. It has a tranquil, soothing, and calm atmosphere to it. You can take a break on one of the benches and just admire the sound of the rain and music that blend together so nicely. The music creates a sense of emotion within the player, and that's what art often does, because we feel the emotion that the composer tries to convey. The last thing I'd like to discuss is the different areas of the game. Throughout your play session, you will visit and explore numerous locations that are all different in tone and color. A place called Mantis Village conveys a primitive, traditional, and tightly knit setting. Meanwhile, in an area called the Queen's Garden, creates a beautiful, rich, and lush environment that is pleasing to look at, and each place tells its own tale. The Mantis Village is a village home to the humble mantises. The village is simplistic in nature, and it paints a picture of ancient primitiveness with its wooden floors and walls, alongside the strands of rope that is seen supporting most of the structure. These mantises are a survivalist bunch, not relying on advanced technology to aid them in their everyday life. In the Queen's Garden, however, tells a different tale, in which a queen has taken care of her garden beautifully and gracefully, but as the kingdom fell, her entire garden became overgrown with life, full of plants and creatures that have taken over. The intense green color palette gives off a feeling of richness and growth, and there is almost no place in the garden that doesn't have lush plants around it. All of these areas are hand-drawn, believe it or not, and they tell their own story through visuals. Artists that draw or paint often do so with the intent of conveying an idea. We see it in many paintings like The Scream or the well-known Mona Lisa. The artists that drew these paintings wanted to convey something, but we are usually left to interpret what it means. In the Queen's Garden, for example, is the garden meant to symbolize the care and love of the queen? Or perhaps the overgrowth meant that the queen has long abandoned her garden? In the Mantis Village, do the mantises live primitively because they stick to tradition? Or perhaps they were left by society to live on their own as a community? The answer depends on the player's viewpoint, and thus the hand-drawn world of Hollow Knight is expressed as a painting, where the artist beautifully conveys an idea, but we are left wondering what the painting means. Hollow Knight is literature because there is a story that a player must go through, and to understand the deeper meaning would require the player to grasp certain themes and create their own interpretation of the story, similar to that of most literature. Hollow Knight is music because the music creates a theme and an atmosphere for the world, in which an idea can be conveyed if the person listening were to interpret or create an understanding of what the music is about. Hollow Knight is a painting because the hand-drawn worlds are paintings that tell their own story in the form of colors and lines. And to the person looking at the art, there is a certain meaning hidden behind it that the artist tries to convey. But we are left to interpret what the deeper meaning is, because art is not a single definition, but rather it is something we interpret. Hollow Knight is an art. It is created by a group of people who had an idea that they wanted to express, and they expressed it creatively in the form of a video game. Video games are an art, and Hollow Knight is a prime example of that.